Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dan Nessel Show. I'm your host, Dan Nessel. So maybe this is you, right? You're caught up in your own career drama or your march towards success, so much so that maybe you forget yourself. So you start to think that being exhausted is like a badge of honor, and it's just part of the game. And come to think of it, maybe this is a lot of us. Certainly sounds like me sometimes. But what happens when it's too much and when your bodies and minds can't keep up? My guest today might be able to tell us. As a high-performing chief marketing officer, she was used to the grind of a 20-hour workday until she hit a wall. So she decided to hit pause, packing her bags, and taking some me time in Peru's Sacred Valley. Now, sure, this dramatic turn brought her some notoriety and caught the attention of Wall Street Journal and the Journal podcast. She got famous a little bit, but it didn't fix the problem. After she returned to corporate life, she hit the same issues. So she decided to make a clean break, marking her second exit and solidifying her place in the Great Resignation. Now, as the CEO of her own firm and a career transition expert, she's on a crusade to help other women navigate similar challenges, empowering them to leave jobs that demand more than they give. Through the Raze to Rise project, she amplifies the stories of women navigating career transition from the Great Resignation through the Great Whatever We're In Now. And she must be doing something right because she's just got a book deal, so be on the lookout for her upcoming book, Women Who Walk, expected in 2024. Be prepared to be inspired, because today we're diving deep into a conversation about resilience, reinvention, and women's empowerment with two-time resigner and the founder of Raze to Rise, the incredible Sara McElroy. Sara, it is good to see you.
Thank you, Dan. Man, that is a heck of an introduction. I think I need you to be my hype man anywhere I go from now on.
Happy to help in any way I can. I mean, the work that you're doing absolutely deserves much better intro than I could ever give you. That's for sure. And I know that during the course of our conversation tonight, my listeners will absolutely feel the same way. But the work that you're doing, Raze to Rise, when I first heard about it, gosh, almost, I want to say 7 or 8 months ago is probably around the time when we first met. And at the time of this recording, we're in the summertime. So early in 23 or late 22 is when we first connected. And it's taken a little bit of back and forth to get schedules to align and schedules to, I guess, work out and planets to align. But we're here at last, and you deserve every word, if not more, than what I can give you. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. It is absolutely my pleasure. This is my favorite kind of conversation to have, the free form about what is happening with everything that is changing in the world of work and how we can really make it work for us moving forward. So I'm excited.
That's cool. I have, career transition and work changes in the future of work. Are topics that do come up from time to time on the show. I've had some great people on. And I love these episodes because I always learn, so it gets to be self-reflective a little bit, right? So I'll hear about what your advice is on career transition, the kind of things that you see with the people that you work with. And I know they're going to be like, yeah, that's me again. That's me. But look, disclaimer, I'm not looking to transition. Hello, Lixel, my company. I'm certainly very happy where I am, but I know that this is, managing your career is not a thing that should happen when you quit or when you leave. Managing your career should be a mindset, a constant thing. So it's always good to know what the experts are saying and how that can apply to you and reflect on you. I mean, that's just sort of the way I think about it.
So good. Well, I love what you just said, Dan, because I believe that too, that the moments of our career that are the most impactful are those ones that are coming in the in-between, not the big moment of, turning in the resignation letter and walking out the door. We see those as massive milestones because they do mark such definitive endings and new beginnings in our careers. But really, it's that in-between and the journey that is most powerful. And it's where we're learning the most about what we're wanting to do next. based on where we are in the type of work that we're doing, culture, our season of life, maybe personal demands, all of those things. But you're right. You should be, if you're being an intentional, conscious architect of your career, which is what I highly encourage as far as like the mindset moving forward, where we're being the stewards of the direction that we're going. Like that's where you're thinking about that, and you're learning and you're kind of testing different things to be able to say when you do make a leap, you've got a real sense of what that next step, even if you don't know what will be beyond it and like where you'll land ultimately. As long as you know what that next step is and it's aligned with you, you're going to be in good shape.
It's getting to that point, right? Like, how do you know where to get to that next step? And let's kind of turn back the clock a little bit here and kind of figure out how you arrived at understanding all of this. So, you've had you talk about, figuring out what matters. You said, I love what you said. The most impactful moments are the in between. And that is like, that's where you need to be looking. And yet, stuff happens, right? I mean, as I said before, you exhaust yourself, you run into a wall, you have a shitty boss, you have some kind of thing go on, I don't know, there's some kind of malfeasance or some crap that happens at your company, or maybe you're just tired and you just had enough and you break down. There are any number of reasons that are not the in-between, that's actually the bookend. And when that happens, you decided to take a pause and go to Peru for a while. Not everybody can do that. But when that does happen, oftentimes people are just like, I got to quit. Now, you've done that a few times. I've done it a few times, but you've done it a few times kind of during this whole big career, like the Great Resignation, which happened over the past several years. I would argue it's still happening. And, along with that, there's this whole, what does work look like? Are we going back to the office? Are we staying home? Tech is imploding. Now we have AI with like putting all these people out of work and just looking at or potentially doing that. So there's a lot of this happening. Within all of that, though, you have been a kind of, I don't know, exemplary person in terms of how you dealt with it all. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Like who were you before that first resignation? And then, when you resigned, like what led to that resignation and how did that go? Like, just kind of give us a little bit of that, because it's
Sure.
super interesting.
Yeah, I'll definitely take you through the backstory. But what I want to say is that even though we're sitting here talking and it's come together in such a way that it looks exemplary, I will be so honest that many times of this career transition, it has been a mess, and not in like the kind of way, right? Like when we say the word mess, we think of it as like, this is a mess. This is sort of a failure. Like it shouldn't ever get like this. To me, like the mess is necessary. I call it necessary. And that's what I've been in, is the necessary. And like, that's what I just want to be really honest and transparent about, is that like, this has been a little bit of a Sara with guinea pig in her own life experiment, and then talking to other women and capturing their stories and insights too. But we learn just by doing. And so for me, it was really, I was that quintessential good girl, like top performer in school, valedictorian, go off to the good school, get the great job. And I just had this idea of like, if I just follow the playbook, that perfect life playbook where you climb the ladder and you chase the fancier titles and the fatter paychecks, like everything will work out and you're guaranteed, at least quote unquote, in my, my naive mind, you're thinking like, oh, that's how you guarantee safety, security, stability, financially and otherwise in this world. And so that was like, run that game just over and over and over again. But I will say that in 2013, I had a really just gut-wrenching divorce. And during that time, I was struggling with some like physical health issues, mental health issues, had come off of dealing with PTSD from an assault that had actually happened after a work event in 2012. Like it was a really horrible time. So I'm getting divorced. I end up actually getting fired from the job that I had at the time, which if you had met Sara, even a year ago, I wasn't talking about this because I still felt it was like I was ashamed of it. But I want to be really honest that in losing kind of everything, divorce, lost the job, lost my family, lost my friends, moved out of the house, like it felt like my life was crumbling around me. The one thing that I grabbed for, my life preserver, was my career, because it was the one thing that even though I'd gotten let go, I knew I could still do it. And it was like, Sara, this is your lifeline. Like you just have to make it work. And so that's really when I went full bore into my career, and I lost all sense of who Sara was as a human completely. It was just like I worked. I didn't really have much of a social or personal life, like a little bit here and there. And then the time of 2020, when we pick up the story where I was a CMO, I was doing an executive MBA program in between the job and the school program, working up to 20 hours a day, not every single day, but like just super unsustainable. And it just, in my mind, it had always worked. The formula, like you just run the playbook, run the game. And something started to shift and change in that finally in April 2023, I had what I thought was the start of shingles. And I left the office at work and went to the doctor. And I'm sitting in this little beat up medical clinic outside of Atlanta. And the doctor tells me, Sara, you have shingles. And I just I remember I was elated to hear that. I was overjoyed. It sounds so crazy.
Yeah. When did that happen?
That was April of, I'm so sorry, I said the wrong year. I apologize. April of 2021 is when
21. Okay. That makes
yes,
sense.
apologies. I just fast forwarded to where we are today. But no,
Wow.
2021. And as I'm leaving the doctor's office, I do have compassion, but moment of lucidity that's like, okay, Sara, this is not what we dreamed of. Like, this was not how I ever thought it was going to be. And I'm working in this environment where people are playing fast and loose with ethics and morals. And, it's just the culture is terrible too. And I'm like, what have I given of myself and traded of myself to be here? So that's why I quit that job. And I quit actually on the last day of my little shingles mini sabbatical when I was off for, 8 days and had the doctor's note, right? Like nobody's going to tell me that I can't be here or that I have to work and can't stay home and rest. And like, that was the biggest gift for me. I was just thrilled to have that time off. And I didn't want to have to, raise my hand and say that I was the one who was struggling. So I did quit. And I was like, I need a full life reset. And I went off to Peru for a little bit and began reconnecting with the parts of me that weren't just lost over the last couple of years, but were lost in that period of the divorce and all the heartache in those years from even childhood and things. And it's like you start to open up this new door into, thinking like I'm going to head down this new road. It just kind of career wise, and it just changed everything for me. And so new job in Florida is where I ended up after that.
So you ended up in Florida. How long were you in Peru? Just out of curiosity.
It was just a week, but it was this wellness retreat and really amazing for disconnecting. Like I didn't have internet for a good part of the time I was there. Actually, it's so funny. My old boss, my CEO of my other company that I had quit and was no longer being paid by, was trying to reach me, and he knew I was in Peru. And so I was like, no more internet. I'm done. Like, I'm just done. I'm going to take this time and I'm going to reconnect with myself. And a lot of things started to unfold from there.
Sometimes all it takes is exactly that. Just get off the grid, but you have to be intent about it and have that kind of, you have to know, okay, something's got to give, something's got to change. I'm going in and I'm just going to search, figure it all out.
You short circuit it, right? Like you short circuit what the lather, rinse, repeat of our current life cycle, day to day, it keeps us really stuck. And it's really hard to figure out what needs to change when you're just, ending your day and going back into work the next. And a weekend is not enough time to start to think about those things.
Everything that you sort of shared just there, I'm processing. And I guess I'm hoping that our listeners are too, because you really just dropped so much, I guess, heart-wrenching material in a minute or two. And I understand its backstory, and the Dan Nelson show doesn't dig into divorce. It is a part of you though, and it's just interesting. But if you kind of piece it all together, and you jumped into work almost to give yourself structure, but to put all that behind you, or to get it out of your mind, or to escape, or whatever the reason was.
To prove I had value,
To
Dan,
prove you have value.
Because honestly, you go through that kind of breakup on the other side of, so the mental health issues were really born out of like the assault that happened, and it brought up actually a lot of trauma from childhood, and I was hospitalized for a few months in 2012, or in and out of the hospital. I mean, it was awful. And to then the following year later, like I know I put my husband at the time through a lot, but to have a year later, to have the marriage fall apart, and then to lose my job, to then actually go through an estrangement with my family, and I'm not even in contact with my family anymore, my friends, I move houses. My ex and I are even sharing the dog, so I don't even have my dog full time. It was just like, I must not, it sounds terrible. So I just want to preface it before I say this, but I thought like or part of me did, I must not have value. Like my whole life is crumbling. People are leaving. How do I prove that I'm worthy of this? And what always made Sara worthy? Well, Sara was a straight A student, the valedictorian, like everybody loved Sara when she did that. And so my brain, in trying to, and I have so much compassion for her, right? But like trying to grasp onto something to hold on to and be like, I'm still worth something. That's where I poured myself into after that.
It's well, thank you very much for sharing that. I know, like, we all have our troubles and our issues. I think women have it much worse. So like what you're talking about there, sadly, you're not alone in your story about feeling that you have no value. And I've had a guest or two who've talked to me about it, but more than that, I know people, and I hope we all know people that we can help and that we talk to about these things if you happen to be of the right, kind of mind, and you're willing to talk. And the fact that you went through that and you came out on the other side, it took a long time for you to ultimately hit that wall. I mean, it's no surprise you hit that wall.
Right.
And now where you are now, you're clearly have been processing or processed, or I think that's the kind of thing you process for the rest of your life, but in different ways, right?
Right. It layers, right?
Yeah. I was just thinking though, I mean, it's interesting. I was going to say funny, but I hate to use the word funny with this whole thing. It sounds so callous, but it's definitely worth kind of picking on a little bit. This whole idea of being a valedictorian overachiever and just going in that direction. And because that's me, I was the valedictorian of my high school. I thought that I'd be on a path.
Right.
But in my case, when I got through college and stuff, and I was just like, I put that aside, almost ignored it on purpose, because, I didn't want that to identify me anymore.
Mm.
And I had other reasons, and I am seeing a therapist to work all this stuff out too.
Yeah, totally,
by the way,
absolutely.
full transparency.
Here for that.
I was, sometimes the universe tells you things. So today, I went to see my therapist, and we're talking through a couple things about, what's it called? Family. It's where you have different parts.
Yes, internal family systems.
Internal
IFS,
family
right?
systems. Thank you very much. Internal family systems. Thank you. Yes. So we're sort of working through that, but we went back into like, okay, high school days and just thinking about this, and it's like it got on this kind of tear about being the valedictorian, but learning later that valedictorians, by and large, don't become leaders. Like valedictorians, by and large, become followers.
Interesting.
They've proven during school that they know how to work within a structure really well. They know how to follow rules really well. Excellent test takers, good thinkers, really, really excellent writers. Just the mechanics of the whole thing, we got it down. So it's no surprise when we're in jobs that require writing, or that, we're sort of thinking about, or even if it's STEM, whatever it is, but there's a structure, there's a system. It's when you get outside of that system that valedictorians tend to be a little lost. And that has nothing to do with your assault or with any of that. It's just a matter of like, there's that point just kind of just stood out to me, that we share a lot in common there, but also, how crazy is it that you go up to a certain point in your life and you're told that you're the best and you're a leader and you're the best, you're the greatest, and look, you have the top grades. And then like in life, that just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So I think we're all kind of screwed from the beginning, actually, in some ways, like from age 18.
Like we're programmed for those, like the dopamine hits of the attaboys, the good girls, all of that, the rewards, the accolades, all the things. And then you get out into the real world and you start to realize that isn't how it works at all. And also that doesn't take into consideration who you are at your most core fundamental human essence whatsoever, right? Because that is like the one straight and narrow path. You do that to get to the valedictorian. So of course, like for a lot of valedictorians, they're like, let's just follow the same path. And if you're following the same path, you're not really being a leader, right? You're carving your own path. You're being a leader. So I can completely relate to that. I also was just like lamenting even just a few years ago, like where is the sort of life roadmap or, the next step? Because I thought that's just how this worked. But
also, to be fair, things have changed a lot in the last,
very true.
During these last 30, 40 years, and
yes.
Look, I graduated high school 30 years ago, so it's been a while for me, but I mean, it has not been a straightforward journey, starting probably within just a few years after that.
Totally.
So like being Gen Xer, like, it's like, okay, fine. I'll deal. I mean, it is what it is. But I think ensuing generations and everybody, over the last, whoever's graduated at any time, whoever's been in the career world since the 90s onward, is just like, how can you possibly think that there is a playbook? And
yeah, right.
So when you think about that, and you get onto your own career, you came back to Florida, from Peru, you go to Florida, you get into another job, and then it didn't answer your problems, right? Because there's no playbook, right, like you said. Right. So what happened there? So
yes.
you had your second resignation. Sort of get back to where we're going here. You got your second resignation. What did that mean to you?
I was only in that job for about 9 months. And so I am really horrified when I'm starting to realize this is not going to work either. When I got into that job, it was coming down to a company with a legacy brand and a lot of the good old boys club kind of thing. And in fact, there was one of the other people at the company was making some sexually harassing comments that weren't addressed for months. And so finally this, like the things were happening in September and October of 2022. And I kept pushing it for something to happen through January of I'm getting all my dates, my years wrong now.
2021.
2021. Thank you. Yes, 2021. And so it's like September and October, and HR even overheard one of the comments. So I'm thinking like, there's no way that this is going to fly. But it did. And they finally do an investigation like middle of January because I'm not going to drop it. And I get the readout from HR on a Monday. I'm actually off that day because I was like really struggling to be in that job. And my anxiety is just through the roof. And I'm knowing it's not good, but hopeful that maybe there's something coming out of this this investigation that will make me feel valued, worthy of staying, make the company worthy of staying, like it's worthwhile. And she tells me like there's no new outcomes. And I'd even asked her, like, does he know that what he was saying was wrong? And she started to say to me, Sara, he knows that his style is a little dot dot dot, because I didn't let her finish. I was like, oh my goodness, like sexual harassment is not a style. Thank you very much. Like, no, I'm not. And so I just knew after that, I hung up the phone and I knew I was going to quit the next day. And I wrote this like pretty amped up resignation letter, like,
Burn that bridge.
Yeah, anti-harassment, power of women's voices, like Sara. Good girl Sara has never done anything like that before. And I took my laptop into the office before 7 a.m. I hit send on it. I sent it to my boss, HR, and the CEO, and I walked out the door and I didn't even give 2 weeks notice. Because to me, the dragging of the feet for months to not investigate and to not have anything new come out of it and to try to tell me that this is just his style and he knows it's a little, I don't know, lacking tact or whatever she was going to say. Like all of those things to me are like, absolutely not. After shingles and everything, like I'm so still burnt and fried. I cannot do this. And so that's what prompted me to leave. But what I will say, Dan, is with what you said about how the universe sometimes, just kind of like drops things in that we need to pay attention to. I look back at both of those experiences as needing to be that extreme, to be the kick in the butt that Sara McElroy, needed to leave corporate because I was terrified and, always thinking I would be an entrepreneur. I always used to say, even when I was like in my early 20s, that I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I just don't have my big idea. I just was so frightened though. I didn't know that I could do it. And so I think I really needed to like come up against my absolute edges of what I'd be willing to tolerate to then make that leap. And it told me, it was very much, these are mirror moments to tell me what I still need to work on as well. Because the way that I'm showing up in these environments, the Sara that's also choosing these environments, like all of those things made me realize that there was a lot of work for me to do as far as my role in all of it too. Now, this is not excusing any bad behavior
Right.
or anything, but like it's amazing when we can start to see these opportunities of mirrors of like, oh, Sara, this is probably needing to be healed from what happened in 2012 with that other assault, right? You know what I mean? Like you start to see these opportunities that are coming together in ways that seem to be bigger than just randomness. And that's what that felt like.
Yeah, you certainly start to see those connections between the different events of your life, and
Totally.
things don't happen in silos. There's either patterns or something. This, and again, and I think I think you're clear about it, but when you say that you have a part to play in what happens to you, that's not saying that you are asking to be a victim or you're asking for that kind of stuff. That has nothing to do with it. It's more about, why would I choose to work for that company? What put me in that environment in the first place? I mean, clearly if I had known there had been a harasser, I wouldn't have gone there. That's a different situation. But, I understand the value of kind of digging into, why you make why you make the choices you make. That's why I'm in therapy. I mean, this is why.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why I feel like I'm, I love where I'm at with my career. I think right now things are going great in my career and my own personal brand and the way that things are launching in my life. But it took a really, really, really long time to get here. I'm still on the journey. And I always look at myself and I'm like, geez, I wish I would have known this 15 years ago. Right. But if I didn't have the experience I had over the last 15 years, then this wouldn't be me anymore. Like there's no way around it. So it's, instead of going back and saying, I shouldn't have made that choice or I couldn't, or that was the wrong thing to do. It's self-defeating. It's more like you need to be who you are now. You need to recognize that you are who you are now because of those things.
It was necessary, Dan.
It was necessary.
Yeah, right.
I love that. I wrote that down. But like it's just like, I'm not saying that you that you don't have control. But sometimes you don't have control. Like sometimes you really are in a you're not yourself, like you said, or you're not at your best, or like in my case, and you mentioned anxiety before. Anxiety plays a big role and has played a bigger role in my life, and I've learned a lot more about that recently. And my listeners know I've talked about a little bit about ADHD. I don't like to go down deep in the hole because this is not an ADHD show. Granted, some of the discussions may be powered by ADHD a little
right.
bit, but no, that's not what I'm about here. But I will say that that colors some of the choices you make. Like the impulsivity. That's like, ooh, that sounds like a great job. Look at that opportunity. It's clearly better. Like when I think one thing people should know is that the expression "the grass is greener," I think was created by somebody with ADHD because like the grass is almost always greener. The that bright shiny object is much better than the current dull shiny object I have always. Right. So now you got to be mindful of it and be able to put the brakes on, and it took me a long time to get there. But you were talking about like you had now been in this situation, this terrible role, like terrible experience at a job, 9 months, people say, oh, this is a short amount of time. I mean, you needed to get out of there clearly. But it inspired you to do some pretty incredible things. So you talked about like a shock to the system and how, what I think it wasn't a shock system, short circuit.
Short circuit, yes.
Short circuit stuff. So how did this then play into where you went next and what you did? And, I'm sure we're going to get to Raze to Rise now, but Raze to Rise, but yeah.
Yes. Well, actually that was the next piece of the puzzle. On the other side of quitting, I am so emboldened and like so proud of myself, but also then I leave the office and I go over to my boyfriend's house and I have that holy shit moment of like, oh my God, what have I done? I would not even recognize this version of me, but man, we've opened something up here. And, I just felt like I could not be the only woman who was experiencing this kind of getting mired in a spin cycle of burnout, overwhelm, toxic cultures, all of those things. And felt like I wanted to talk to other women to find out what they were experiencing because we are in the throes of the Great Resignation at this point. Millions of women are actually leading the way of the Great Resignation. It's like, I want to hear their stories, their defining moments, their breaking points, the things that inspire them and keep them going. And so I have a journalism background. That's what my undergrad degree is in. So I figured I would lean on that. And I started interviewing women and capturing their stories. And that's where Raze to Rise became this journalism project to share their wisdom, crowdsource, strategies, tactics, like, kind of like all the good things that we would want to know from somebody on the inside. I wanted those messy hands in the clay learnings, not the buttoned up advice we get from people about career transitions on the other side. I wanted the raw stuff. And so that's why I started that project. And what happened is that it grew in that we started to see that there's so much universality coming out of what we experienced during the Great Resignation, like these incredible, feels like not just trends, but actually like forward looking themes of where people are headed as far as how they approach their work, especially with women having to manage a lot more of the burden of housework during the pandemic. That's where a lot of this really hit ahead, and realized that this could become a book. And although I'm saying, and totally agree, like there is no real playbook, but my book, I'm hoping, is a bit of a playbook. And really, I mean, not to give off a spoiler completely now, but the kind of playbook that I believe we're moving forward is your career is, I like to say that designing a fulfilling career is an inside job. And we were taught so much to look externally at all of the things that we should be considering when we're deciding what job we want, what career we're going to do, all of those things. And I just believe that the key is within us. It's like it's the self-discovery, but it's also our physiology is, to me, the most powerful tool that I have found to balance out the fallacies that our logical mind, our rational brain can get caught up in, like, oh, Sarah, look at that. That's a great benefit package on that job. It's got a great title. And, kind of like all those things that my rational brain would say, oh, I don't even know if I really want that job at that company, but it's a great title. It's a great salary. It's stable. It's, all those things. We balance out that part of us. It's not that our rational brain goes away, but we balance it out by actually using our emotions, our intuition, gut instinct, whatever you want to call it. Our physiology actually is giving us feedback all the time in real time related to where we can find greater fulfillment if we just tap into that. So it's been really cool to go down this road and start digging into some of the newer research, as well as some of the research actually that was coming out in the late 90s, early 2000s, that's just not as well known because of the way the medical establishment is structured.
And is this so okay, there's a lot here. Again, every time you talk, I feel like there's a lot to unpack, but which is amazing. So
ADHD.
Yeah. Well, let's say, so when you talk about when you talk about physiology, I do want to hear what that's like, a little bit more about that. There's a lot about I've heard and seen a lot about, your gut, like it's not it's not the expression "listen to your gut" isn't just a metaphor or
Correct.
It's
Exactly.
not an expression. There is actually a physiological response in your stomach, in your gut and your heart, and there's different parts.
Exactly.
And you have to listen to those. How many of us have been in situations where you're like, an offer in front of you, or you have you're looking at a job application, you're like, I don't know, but you don't listen to that.
Right.
I don't know.
Yep.
Right. You got to take that to its conclusion now. I mean, now I know this more, but it's hard to do. You're right, because going back to like those internal family systems, the parts of you that are like your manager inside is like,
your protector too, probably somewhat.
The stability. Go to the stability. That's the great benefits. Benefits trump feelings. That's the way we're raised. That's the way we're hardwired for this. And now we know, of course, we can rewire ourselves with work. But anyway, going back to this kind of new playbook you're talking about, I've spoken with people who also have their own versions of like just a similar theme, different product, right? So Mark Hirschberg, one of the fellows, one of the guys who's been on my show, talks about the career toolkit, where learning like career management was never taught as a skill, and it should be. Career management needs to be, and that speaks to your like kind of that career management should be an inside job, right? Designing a fulfilling career is an inside job. I love that. So like it comes from inside. You have to build it from within. I had another person on who talked about how managing your career, or how being like, again, same thing. Career management is not taught, but you need to spend time, to dig into yourself, to learn your why, figure out your mission, your purpose, and then match your career journey towards that as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
These are all important things. Mindset has so much to do with it. But let's talk about, where you're going with the physiological side of this and your own playbook a little bit, without selling the whole book ahead of time, because we want people to get that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's been really fascinating to me because, so actually I will say this is not the version of the book that I intended to write. This is actually not the book proposal that I submitted. I have just a rockin' publisher and editor who appreciated the fact that after I submitted the proposal and accepted the offer in December, that there was so much more that unfolded and so much more research that I did too, that it was like, this book is actually, if I write the book the way that I thought I was going to write it, it will not be complete. And it felt like too stiff and polished and put together. And so it felt like, okay, to the point of the necessary, like I needed to bring in more of the ups and downs and the unexpected twists of the journey, because that's where I think we can really get tripped up when you're feeling like you're falling because things are not looking like what you thought they were going to be. Being able to come back to like resource yourself and come back to that belief that like you're still on the right path. It's really hard to do. So I wanted to share that. Now, the physiology piece is really interesting to me because I got asked all the time, even on LinkedIn from random people. I'd have women reach out and be like, oh, making bold moves. That's what my tagline is on there, empowering women to, or helping brilliant women make bold career moves. And they're like, how do you make a bold career move? How do I make a career transition? And I know it sounds really silly, but even though I had those in my tagline and I would be asked those questions, I didn't really know how to best answer it because I felt like what people were asking for was like the 1 through 10 steps. And I did not have that. I'm like, that doesn't exist. At least in my opinion, it doesn't exist. And don't get me wrong, there are so many great resources and people out there that will tell you how to do all of the like strategic, tactical things to get you where you need to go with your career. But what I was looking at was the layer deeper. To your point, the why, aligning our internal world with our outer world and trying to match the two, ensuring, our values and who we are as a person is included in that. I started to realize that the only way that we can figure this out is by listening to the way that our body responds to the experiences that we have and our emotions. So Candace Pert is a neuroscientist who discovered the opiate receptor. And she also did a lot of work and wrote a book called Molecule of Emotion about how emotions, their research found, is born out of the neuropeptides that are created in the brain that are then sent to all of the cells of the body. And it actually changes the way the cells of the body, when the neuropeptide attaches to the receptors, it's all vibrating and moving. We have this idea that we're all just like sort of chemical, but it's got like an electromagnetic element to it too. We are starting to actually shift our chemistry and our electromagnetic field with our emotions. And so the next piece of it that's really interesting is that she says, from the work about the opiate receptor and this work, she believes we are hardwired for experiences of joy and bliss. In fact, those experiences are what we have evolved toward. They've kept us alive as a race, like continuing to go after the goals and the things that bring us joy, bring us fulfillment, bring us bliss, etc. It's actually hardwired when you look at the structure of our brain and the opiate receptors and how we are receiving endorphins and all those things. And so it was like, to me, why would I try to define what my career is going to look like on a piece of paper without actually experiencing it? Until we experience it, we just don't know. And so that's the biggest thing that I want to bring to bear in all of this is, yes, we can have a plan and we can think we're going to do the thing of the, Sara, write the book. I'm going to do it. I'm going to get a book deal. All well and good. But until we actually get in the weeds and we start doing the thing, we're not going to actually know. And so that's where the physiology comes into play. Joy, and also what you're talking about related to the gut brain, heart brain, and actual rational, brain, head brain, I guess. All of those work in concert together too. And they're perceiving both the gut and the heart. There are neurons in there that are perceiving what we're experiencing and sending up messages to the brain. Candace Pert was actually saying that she believes that there are emotions that we experience that actually get stuck in the subconscious. They never reach the level of conscious awareness. So there's so much in our body that we're picking up from everything around us, but we're only saying we're going to decide our careers based on like a rational brain. To me, it doesn't make sense in the way that we were designed. And so the last piece of the puzzle that I'll include in this is that this wasn't, scientific, but I loved what Elizabeth Gilbert said on Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek podcast in March of 2020. She talked about the body versus the thinking mind. And if you go back through human history and you look at the way the body evolved over hundreds of thousands of years versus the thinking mind, which really only came in our evolution much later on, our bodies have this amazing body antenna. We are built to experience and move through all of the things we're facing in life through our senses, which then feeds into our rational brain. So to me, it started to make sense of like, we're cutting out such an important piece of our intelligence and our decision-making capabilities when we're just staying in our heads.
You've just explained like 80% of my bad choices in life. I think, like you make choices, and this also goes back to, being the great student and the kind of the person who understands things when it's written down and it's in a book, and you can read it, acknowledge it, analyze it, come up with new and interesting thoughts. Sometimes it doesn't even matter if you ever experience it, right? But once you then experience something, then and only then can I think is what you're saying. And, we have cut off our senses. I wonder even how far we can take that when we think about the fact that, nowadays with hybrid work situations, pandemic, no pandemic, doesn't matter. We are sense deprived on a day-to-day basis.
Yes.
With our colleagues, with ourselves. I mean, there's a whole lot out there talking about, the dangers of the lack of social interaction and loneliness in the workforce today, especially among the younger generation who never really experienced what it's like to be. I can't imagine. I imagine there's like 25-year-olds who have never ever been to an office party. It's crazy to me. But regardless, looking at somebody through a screen, right? I mean, it's a miracle. I'm able to talk to you, Sara. Doesn't matter where we are. It's opened up so many doors for me to be able to, talk with people. But if we were sitting in the same room, across from one another, right, with mics set on a table, we'll still have a probably similar or great conversation, but it would be different in some ways, in some tangible and intangible ways, because we'd have sensory reactions happening, right? And some of those are primal, some of those are, just trained. But the point is, you can't have that. I'm just relying on what I'm hearing. I'm relying on, what I'm seeing in your facial expressions, which is all pretty incredible things. So there's a couple of senses at work, but not all the senses.
Right.
So what do you think about that when you're talking about looking for like people in transitions and trying to find their next big thing, or even people who are in the necessary business of their work and looking for those signals, or maybe missing the signals that it's time to move on because they're not sensing, they're not exposed to this whole sensory process. I've never thought of this before. So what do you think? I mean, how is that affecting people? Let's talk about it first from the quitting side. Like, part of what you do is, you're helping people to understand when it's time to go, right?
Right.
How does that work? Or is that affected at all by where we are now with this kind of lack of sensory information?
Yeah, it's a great question. My gut is that it does impact our ability to suss out those things But without, we're going to have to wait probably another couple years to have good research on understanding all of the implications of our switch. But no, it's a really interesting point, and I will have to contemplate it because I didn't think about that for the book, at least not yet. To me, the biggest concern is less of am I there or am I not? Because even so, I know I'm totally with you in that we don't have all of our senses because we're not in the same room, but I am still picking up enough of your energy to be able to tell I'm enjoying this conversation. Like, I'm having fun. This is great. Like, you know what I mean? This is fun and joyful for me. I want to keep doing things like this. And so that's the kind of signaling that I think we can still pick up, or we feel that feeling of oh, this is really unpleasant, or I'm feeling another sensation that I ignored for a really long time is that constriction feeling in the body of that reluctance, that hesitation, or that resistance, and ignoring that for a really long period of time. To me, it's that we have been trained that you leave your emotions, your body, your everything, and your personal life is left at the door, right? You are just in the professional world, you're kind of like a brain floating around in an apparatus that's going to allow you to execute what you need to do. Or at least that's the way I thought of myself. I didn't even really think about my body half the time. It was just is my body going to be able to do what I need to do for work today? Is the answer yes? Then we keep going. If the answer is no, then we get shingles. We hit the reset button, But yeah, to me, it's the fact that we've been told that those things don't have a place in business or intuition, for example, going off of more of that gut instinct. We've been taught those things stay out. You're in the business world. This is Gantt charts, spreadsheets, budgets, and data. And so we have been taught to ignore some of the signs that things are not working for us. And what we come to find, and Pert says this in her research, is that disease is the kind of the last Hail Mary to get our attention when we're doing things that are not good for us. And so certainly that's what it took for me. So I think for us, we need to be listening to those subtler cues that are saying the nudges, Sara, this isn't it. Or, ooh, I felt really uncomfortable in, that meeting, that project, whatever it is. There is information that we are receiving from our emotions, our body, our intuition, all the things all the time. And it's just a matter of, and I say just, right? This makes it sound sort of flippant, and I don't mean it, because it does. It takes a lot of time and a lot of practice. This is very much like living laboratory experiment. You start to learn your body's signals, and you can create almost your own owner's manual to realize, oh, now I know what my no is, or I know this feeling that I get when something emotional is actually getting in the way of me being able to be productive. I'm oh, I'm going to have to go clear that. Or it's also, I'll get this feeling when I know an idea or something creative wants to come out for the book. I'll feel for a few days almost this feeling of something bubbling up to the surface, wanting to pop. And then eventually something that I hope is brilliant, I don't know, comes out and it becomes a part of the book. But yeah, it's just amazing when we start to actually pay attention. Our tells are really incredible.
I always feel like I know it. I know I need to do something because I get almost like a scary buzz. Oh man, I'm a very, it's half anxiety. Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. I've just found something.
Yeah.
Oh my God, what am I going to do about this? And then the other half is pure adrenaline, excitement.
Okay.
Yes. Holy shit, I really need to do this. And look, most of the time that doesn't happen. That's a very rare occurrence.
Yes.
But when it has happened in the past, I've been I've furiously, it'll send me down this road of furious writing for a little while. And then I'll finish up yeah, but I have a job.
Right. Yeah.
And I'll put it away. Then I'll go back and be that idea is still really good. Now, we live in a world, I've come a long way with that. And I have a couple of notebooks here with things I know that have to get done, and it's just a matter of finding the timing and the right kind of environment. But they don't all need to get done. I just want to get at least one or two of them done, because I know that I get that buzz about it.
Yeah.
But then the opposite happens, where you're working on something and you feel like, oh man, like almost nauseated. Well, if you feel nauseated at work all the time, you got a problem. I mean,
Yes.
like seriously. But you feel like something's missing, like something's off, just like and constantly. And
Right.
after, it's just, you're right. There's a big feeling to it. And,
Yeah.
it's hard to learn to listen to that. And,
And I
how
know
much of
it's
that is
squishy, right?
self-awareness?
Like
Yeah.
business people don't want to hear this. I understand it. And I was one of these people. Like if you had told me back in 2020, that this was the stance that like you were going to take, Sarah, this is the hill you're going to die on. Like I deeply, deeply believe in this now. I wouldn't have believed you. And I would have been like, that's a crock. Like this is business. What are you talking about? Because I just had no time or space or energy for anything that sounded like it was too soft for the business world. But that's where I think that having that nose turned up, approach or perspective, or, just writing these kinds of things off because they're not traditionally accepted in the business world, I think we're really doing ourselves a disservice. And
sure.
so, yeah, it's to me, it's really important that we start to see that like there are so many other incredible bodies of work and things that people have researched in other areas unrelated to career that I'm finding, I personally believe, all thread together in such a way that will make us so much more, I think, grounded, but also purposeful and intentional, and better able to ride the highs and the lows of our career journey if we start to thread it all together.
Yeah. And it is like that whole idea of like this web that's kind of being woven around us about, or by us maybe, with these varying disciplines, different experiences. I mean, clearly it does all come to bear, especially as you get through your career and get to different places. There's more to, I think, account for.
Absolutely.
Different ways to make yourself satisfied or happy, different things that can make you happy or unhappy.
Absolutely.
Different times. But like, okay, so you're listening to yourself, you're listening to your you're in tune with your emotions. You're at your job, you're feeling like you're going to puke every 3 minutes, and you're not sick, so it's time to quit. That's a pretty clear sign. But essentially your body's telling you, the rational side could also be telling you it's time to go. But
also,
I think, when your rational brain is saying, you know what, this isn't quite right, and you're getting that second signal from your physiological self, then I think, then it's
yes,
the course is clear.
You're right.
Doesn't mean it's easy, right? But what about the other way around? Like, what about when you're looking for a role? So how do you, like we talked earlier, you mentioned about, putting that plan together and getting out there, and we've been in some ways misled to think that there is a playbook that works. And what if, like, when you're out looking for a role, without understanding that kind of emotional reaction to it, or that emotional feeling when you're there, how do you know you're making the right decisions?
Great question. Well, and my answer is going to be in that soft vein, but I tell you, it works. It's really amazing. So there is a practice actually where you would spend time visualizing yourself in both situations. Okay, here I am staying in my current job or the other job I might take, and you don't know what it's going to be, right? But if you visualize and you feel into what your body reaction is to that, you will feel openness and expansion. That means your nervous system feels good about the choice that you're going to be making. That means your nervous system is in a regulated, kind of like calm state, versus that constriction. That is like your nervous system getting ready to either go into fight or flight mode. So it's interesting. Like we can perceive even without, and I'm going to say, right, like once you get into the job, things can happen because when I moved down to Florida, actually, honestly, it sounds so crazy, but when the woman told me, the recruiter told me I'd have to move down to Florida, I swear I heard a yes within me, which I thought was the craziest thing because, and here's the interesting thing too, Dan. It's that I heard the yes when she said it was going to require a move to Florida, not a yes to the job. Not saying that it was the wrong job to
I hear
take,
you.
but
Yeah.
I deeply believe I was meant to be in Florida and all this was to unfold. And like my life has, changed dramatically from all of it. But we have the ability to feel into what we think is going to feel good. And then from there, once you get into it, that's really where you will learn the rubber meeting the road and your body, you're experiencing it every single day and you're also tracking your senses, but that is actually the practice that you would do. And we know that like visualization is such a powerful tool, especially in positive psychology type of stuff. And it's just connecting that visualization to our body and feeling into what feels good. But I will tell you, okay, so I've worked with some women on this, and it's a foreign concept for a lot of people to hear that. Like, okay, I'm trying to decide, like, for example, I was working with a woman who's trying to decide, does she stay in her engineering role or does she go get a PhD or whatever it is? And I ask her, like, okay, like settle in and feel into it. Like, what does it feel like? The thought of going to go after the PhD or staying here. And it's not natural to us when we've cut it off and we haven't used it for a long period of time. So I will tell you that too. If you're listening to this and you're like, okay, I'm going to try it, but like, Sara, that was a crock. It takes time.
You have to develop it.
It does. But you'll start to see, and like, really you can start a lot with like, it's also helpful to be meditating, because in meditating, you're also paying more attention. Like your awareness is not so concentrated in your rational brain. It's much more within you and your internal world. And that's what's providing this feedback through your body.
Yeah, that reminds me, I need to start meditating again. I used to meditate more, and it does make a huge difference.
It does. It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, look, I'm totally on board with the whole mind-body connection, and I still think, and I know that we don't know enough about it, but I know that it's worth exploring, and the kind of stuff that you're doing is certainly taking us further in that direction, but it's interesting, like the whole idea of, I don't know, role playing and thinking about like vision, I guess, vision training and like that. It reminds me of a couple of things like that's happened. That's certainly happened. Like what people say, Dan, close your eyes. When you picture yourself in that role, what does it feel like?
Yeah.
And I used to be like, come on, man. Like,
I know, right? Same.
Well, show me the numbers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It feels like I'm going to be working for a great brand, and
it feels like a good salary and good benefits.
Title, and it's a great salary, so it feels like it's the right move. And you talked about going to Florida. When I moved to Australia from Japan back in the day, and I thought, yeah, Australia, I want to go to Australia, and I also thought that I wanted to go for the job, but I wanted to go for people, not for the job.
Yeah.
And, I really felt good about the people. Didn't really think about the job. Probably should have thought about the job. Because the people were connected to the job. When the job didn't work out super well, neither did the people. And I ended up losing, a few relationships in Australia. Maybe that weren't good for me in the first place, but maybe that could have been.
Sure.
I don't know. You make choices based on rationality, and that's what happens. I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
Gosh, I'm just looking at I can't believe we've been talking this long. I wanted to ask you, as we wind this down, what is the kind of, like, for women out there, especially, I know you work primarily with women, but I know you say for men too. But when you're working with women, like, how can is there like a way for them to sort of, like measure how their readiness to leave the job? Is there something that's going on where they can say, hey, I'm not sure if I want to talk to somebody, but how do I know that I'm ready to go?
Yes. Well, great question. I developed a quit readiness quiz, and it's on my website. Then you can actually go take the quiz there. And what it looks at is all kinds of those factors that come into play as we're making this decision. Because it can even be like, okay, I'm starting to feel this knowing that I'm going to need to leave, but it doesn't mean we're necessarily ready, right? And like that's the thing that I advocate too, is that even if I'm sitting here and I'm telling you a softer way of managing your career, figuring out where you want to go next or how you're going to achieve fulfillment or, find joy and meaning. I would say too that none of the rational stuff goes out the window as far as planning when you make your move. Like, don't do a Sarah and don't quit the next day with no 2 weeks notice. Like that doesn't feel good. That's a real shock to the nervous system. And so the quit readiness quiz looks at how stable you are in other aspects of your life, how long you've been feeling this way. Like on balance, if you're enjoying the job and it kind of is just one thing that's getting in the way, and you could have a conversation, related to flexibility or your hours or having a conflict with a boss or a coworker, and it could be maybe this is just an opportunity for me to, like that kind of mirror analogy where you're using earlier. Maybe this is just an opportunity for me to resolve this conflict. I don't like having conversations with my boss and telling them that something's not working, but maybe this is calling me to the carpet to have to do that, and I want to do that before I walk away from this job. So it looks at your comfort level with uncertainty as well, how stable you are in finances, all that kind of stuff that is the important stuff to consider. We're not just leaping eyes shut into the great unknown because our emotions told us to, right? Like that sounds crazy, but it's a balance. That's what we are. Our intelligence is built up of, I deeply believe, our cognition, our intuition, our body intelligence, like all of these things combined together to make us really it's our superpower all told. And when we're just focusing on one part of it, we just are limiting ourselves. So it's the combination of all.
I'm glad you said that, because I was starting to think I should, maybe those rational thoughts I had aren't where I was. No, I mean, but in all seriousness, I remember times where I would make, I certainly have made a lot of decisions based on pure emotion, like God, I hate this place. Fuck this place. I'm out of here. This kind of thing. But there's, as I got older and kind of the consequences became bigger, right? I mean, clearly when you're just like young, when you can move from job to job, you can take some chances. But when the consequences are larger and bigger, and it weighs on you, you really need to tune in and listen. I would go for these long bike rides back in. I don't cycle much anymore, but I would go for these long bike rides. I live in the countryside a little bit, and I could go on these paths where there was nobody, and just I would inevitably, it would end up like with the same sort of effect as a shower, right? Where you're in the shower, or washing dishes, your mind empties.
Yes.
And thoughts, you hear thoughts
you're in autopilot because you're doing the thing that your body knows how to do. Yep.
And you always hear the expression, "This entered my mind unbidden." And I don't believe that. It's nothing's unbidden. It's there. Mm-hmm. You just have to get shit out of the way for it to rise up. So, out on the bike, it's just repetitive. Boom, 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 boom. You hear this kind of pattern in your head, and your heartbeat's going. Then, some people talk about getting, whatever, a runner's high or some kind of, I would get just serious anxiety episodes, or just like, oh my God, this is terrible. I'm like out here riding a bike, and all I can see is images of this, and this. Let me just try to get it out of my head. And, when that started to happen more and more, then I started to say, okay, I'm going to just listen to this and focus in. And, there's a there, and just cues like that happen a lot to me.
I'm with
anyway, you. Right now it's more like, I think in the way that my life's been going recently, the feeling that pops up more often than not is, and I probably mentioned this probably like, I don't know, I want to say episode 2 or 3 of my podcast, like a long time ago when I first really noticed it. But it's the feeling of being stuck in like that you're in a snake skin.
Yeah.
Right. And that you're just restricted. But it's not as if like there's a fist around your heart or something like this. It's more like you're just you're trying to get out of something, trying to stretch,
Yeah.
but you can't stretch, and then the skin starts to crack, and you're like, oh, wait a second, and you end up kind of, it's almost, and it's like a snake molting its skin,
Yeah.
and snake analogy may not be the best, but the idea of like that being a signal that you're stretching and growing, or that you need to do something to grow, is a lot different than you need to quit your job or you need to do something else. It's just more like you need to find that opportunity to expand.
Sure.
Because if you're not
Absolutely.
expanding, and that's always like coming to grips with that has been a great discovery of my life. And like I will fulfill that, or try to fulfill that. If I can't fulfill it at work, because sometimes your employer isn't able to give you the opportunities you need at that moment,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you can't fulfill it at work, rather than say, crap, these people aren't helping me grow right now, I'm going to look elsewhere. You just, if I can find it elsewhere,
Yeah.
like then, expand in my own way, then I can bring that back into work. And then, you end up growing anyway. I don't know. It's sort of the way that things have been bouncing for me lately.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I totally agree. I think that, I was the person who put it all in the career bucket. And I guess I even really thought that all of my growth and learning and achievements and things would come through that. And there's so much more. And in fact, I deeply believe that some of those times where we're pushing up against that growth edge, and we're starting to say like, this doesn't fit anymore. And this is very uncomfortable. And I can't stay here. You're right. You're absolutely right. It may not be that you need to quit immediately, or maybe you do even stay in the job long term. It's to me where we start to, the important nuance in all of this is, one, you're not acting blindly on emotion. We are not doing like any sort of dopamine craze things. Like that's what I did, and was diagnosed with ADHD a couple months ago. Like I understand myself a lot better now.
Congratulations and welcome to the club.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure. It's such a pleasure to join. But you know what I mean? Like the idea of emotion is giving us information. And then we make the decisions from a regulated nervous system. You're not making your decisions from that amped up point. And you're also you're getting curious when you're feeling that feeling. If it is directly attached to work, you mostly will know. But if you're just feeling that generally, you're right. That is the part of you that is longing to evolve and expand, to your point, asking for something more. And it may just be that you're meant to pull a thread and look down a completely different, down a completely different road. And perhaps it does thread back into the career you have, but it could also take you down some other path eventually. Or maybe you just really like to make music, or I don't know, do whatever kind of art that you like to do in your spare time. It doesn't have to be. That's what I mean by the playbook being like so individualized. There is no cookie cutter playbook anymore at all. So thank you for bringing that to bear as part of the conversation.
I mean, the podcast here is a result of the snake skin. I mean,
awesome.
For sure. I mean, like I felt something, had to do something.
Yeah. It's that itch, right? Like that itch.
It's an itch, and
we get it worse, actually. I was reading about it the other night. ADHDers, we get the itch a lot worse.
We do. I heard that too. And there's quite a few people out there who, I keep, just as an aside again about ADHD and this whole world we live in, I meet more and more people who do, and I don't want to say suffer from it. It's more like it's just, you've got it, or that's the way you're wired.
Right.
Because in my case, it's not suffering. It's more like, just I think differently, and sometimes it has negative consequences that I have to be aware of, but sometimes it has awesome consequences.
Yeah.
And, if I know how to live within that framework better, then I can have better relationships and better professional life. It's just a matter of like, I had to shift kind of the way I think about things a little bit. But I keep running into people who are in the same boat. And then I realized I keep running into people in the same boat because they're all in my profession. Like there's a reason. Right. Yeah, there's a reason why people who are in marketing, people who are in comms, writers, there's a reason why ADHD is very, very prevalent. Yes. And it's the whole creative impulse. It's the idea of really wanting to branch out and try just work on a bunch of different
Novelty
projects
and
at once.
yeah.
And,
Oh yeah.
and in these fields, you're manufacturing a portable career, like you can be a marketer for anything. If you're a marketer, you can
Right.
communicate about anything. If you're a communicator, if you're a copywriter, like that's like probably the ultimate almost ADHD dream job. If you
Right.
like to write, as long as you like to
Yeah.
write, but so it's not really surprising to me that this has led you, that your own personal journey has led you to discover that you also are in the ADHD club, but also that explains a lot of, changes that you, or decisions that you might make,
Yes.
or, the way that you kind of focus in and you find a project that you're really passionate about, and then you just like hyper focus in on it and you get shit seriously done.
Yes.
And that's that seems to be a little bit of the story behind Raise to Rise. Which reminds me, before we go, there's a couple other things. I had one curiosity question. Actually, it's all about
Okay.
curiosity for
All
me.
right. Sounds good.
But Raise to Rise is Raise, R-A-Z-E. Like it's
Correct.
not R-A-I-S-E. So it's a Raise.
Correct.
So it's a destructive word. So what's being destroyed in Raise to Rise?
Yeah. To me, I don't see it as destructive in the way that we generally choose to look at the connotation. To me, it is a clearing for kind of like reinvention or rebirth or whatever term you want to use of transformation. To me, you are clearing out the old and like all of the gunk and the things that we accumulate on this journey of being a human, all of the, like the things that beliefs that don't serve us, the programming maybe we received, like for example good girl conditioning kind of a thing, or the stories that we tell ourselves about what we can and can't do in this life. Like to me, I started pulling the thread on what I like to say is like sort of my career sweater in doing this journey, thinking I'm going on a career transition, going about a career transition, and I pull it and all of a sudden it's like there's very little sweater left here, because to like the point of what I was saying with, to work yourself into a level of shingles and be excited about it, like that's 38, 36, I guess I was at the time, but 36 years in the making, right? So
Yeah.
there's so much that can be grown from that ground once it's raised. It's kind of like a forest fire, right? Like you see that forest fires are actually regenerative in
For sure.
clearing out the things that need to be cleared out. And then you start to see the green shoots again. And that's what I look at this opportunity in front of us as women on the whole, raising the things that we've been taught and told we need to do to rise and build something more beautiful together. And then it's very individual as well.
Yeah, I really I like playing with words, of course, but
I do too.
I love the idea. I love the idea of clearing and
Yes.
clearing the path and making making something regenerative. I also kind of like the idea that look, women out there, stop taking shit and burn the whole fucker down. Pardon me from saying, but sometimes like when you raise something, you're really
Yes.
there's a whole
Yeah.
connotation there. But I'm not saying society or institutions or anything like that, because I'm an institutionalist in many ways. But I will say that the rotten parts of those institutions, the systemic harassment that's happened.
Yeah.
You said earlier, and it wasn't really my purpose to go full circle here, but I will, because you started off by talking about the challenges, the horrors, the trauma that you suffered, and how you jumped into work because you were seeking your own value. Like, what's your own value? That's the shit that needs to be burned. That is like, why
Amen.
would you need to think that? Like, why would you be in the position?
That self-objectification or internalized capitalism, as it's sometimes called, is, oh my God, so insidious. And we carry it with us, and we start to think if we're not productive, we're not in the career, driving the results and hitting the numbers, that we don't have value. It goes all the way back to the Industrial Revolution, and when we were essentially deemed to be worth, however many dollars and cents for an hour
Yeah.
of work. And then we started looking at humans as like resource capital to be considered in that way. And so, yeah, oh my God, these underpinnings, these are tentacles that go way, way, way back, and totally agree that like any lasting imprint of that is keeping us sick and stuck and buying into ways of working that we no longer have to subscribe to.
It's
Yeah, I'm with
poisonous.
you.
Like I've got two girls, right? My daughters, and I think about their future, and I think that they're badasses, and they'll do just
I
fine.
bet they are.
But I was thinking they're starting off with in a much better place than people even 10 years ago did. But there's the deck is stacked in many ways against women, and even if it's in certain careers, maybe not as much. And there's long research and debates and things you can have about which industries that's the case for. But in any however you cut it, once in the business world or as an entrepreneur or like as somebody who wants to blaze their own way in society, there's always going to be somebody out there by virtue of you being a woman who's going to assess your value based on, are you married, do you have kids, or or
still
right
alive
or
and well.
that's right. I mean, that's always going to be the case in many ways. That look, for most people who I know, and I know people like that. For most of them, that's something that they're taught, and it's something that they can get over. Sometimes it's just a fleeting thing that passes, but it's a bias.
Yep.
But some people think of that way seriously, for sure, right?
Yep.
And it's out there. So like I feel like, okay, my kids, that's the kind of stuff. All right, you know what? Carry a flamethrower sometimes. A metaphorical one.
Yeah.
Right. I don't advocate violence of any kind.
Exactly.
And just raise it. But I love that, raise to rise. I didn't mean to necessarily go too far down that tangent, but I really wanted to know about that word, like why you chose that word, because it was sitting in my head, and I love it. I mean, I just love the idea. I think it's a brilliant way to describe what you're trying to do. Look, so we've really talked a lot. I just loved having you on here, Sara, and it's been a pleasure. I've learned a lot about what you're doing, but we only even scratched the surface. I would urge our listeners to look for Sara on LinkedIn, Sara J. McElroy. Her name will be spelled properly in the episode title, or episode, in the episode title. And check out raze2rise.com. That's Raze, RAZETORISE.com. To learn more about Sara and Raze to Rise and all of her wonderful projects and the book and everything. The book coming is Women Who Walk, 2024. Look out for, what do you say, fall, Sara?
Fall, yes.
Yeah, awesome. So with all that in mind, any last words? Is there anything like that you want to kind of leave our listeners with before we say adieu?
Yeah. I think what I would say is that if I were listening to this podcast and I wasn't where, I am on my journey now, and some of the things we talked about sounded a little unconventional related and getting into that a little bit too, right? But there's science behind it too. And that's the thing that's so interesting, is that throughout history, we've always thought that like things were mystical or, magical experiences. And then it's like, I was listening to something today when somebody was talking about germs and how we used to think that the person who was like, there's lots of little tiny little bugs all over you and they're going to make you sick. Like people thought that person was crazy too, until we had a microscope. So like my urging to you would be to keep an open mind and maybe play with this a little bit. That's what I think is most important with any of this. Like if it works for you, amazing. If you try it and it doesn't, that's totally fine too. We're all wired a little bit differently. I believe we can all get to this point where we will benefit from using our physiology in our careers. But this is a journey to just stay open, get curious, and learn more about you and trust yourself. And as long as you're doing that, I mean, I'm perfectly happy if that is your outcome from listening to this podcast. So I think it's great.
I would be ecstatic if that's your outcome too. Be happy,
Yeah.
be curious, trust yourself. And I would say though that, it will work for you because Sarah said so. It's her book, it's her research, it's her work.
I'd like to say so.
She's clearly been walking the walk for a while. She knows what she's talking about. So everybody reads to rise. Women who walk, keep that in mind. And Sarah, we got to do this again sometime.
Sounds good, Dan. I'm here. Let's do it.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for listening to the Dan Nessel Show. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. People always ask me, why do I do the show? I do it for the ratings. I do it for your validation. So do me a favor. Go over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or someplace else, wherever you're listening to podcasts, and subscribe, leave a review, rate me, and share with your friends. Anything you can do to spread the word, I deeply appreciate it. Thanks again for listening to the Dan Nessel Show.